Welcome back to another episode of Keoni Chats. So before we dive into my chat with Claudia Bueermann, I wanted to talk about what happened on March 16th, 2021. So I saw the Stop Asian Hate going on all through social media and then all through the sports world, but I was never really sure what got that whole movement started. What was the spark that got that fire lit? So after I did some research, finding out that in Atlanta, Georgia, a Asian spa was the scene of 8 people's deaths due to a shooting, and 6 of them are Asian. So for me, I think about 2020, we had COVID, and then also the big landmark or the big event that happened during that time that made 2020 so memorable was the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's still going right now, but it's just not as loud as it was, and loud isn't in the good way. As it was, in April of last year or May or June. So it's, to me, when, saying that I was a part of that movement, I experienced it. I mean, I saw it, it was in the news, and, I would think that we want to be more united. COVID has also spread us out. So for me, my thinking is like, okay, Black Lives Matter really showed the world that people are passionate about racial justice and social equality. So, and then COVID might spread us out, but then that also unified us. So I would think that having more unification, more cohesiveness, more just togetherness, and just being able to say that you look different than me, but I still respect you. My head, I'm just thinking that. And then when I read about this and I see what happened, and I can't say that I exactly feel, anything to the degree of how my Black African American friends have felt their whole life, or just during that Black Lives Matter movement. But I get it. I get seeing people that look like you, people that share the same culture as you, and people that, no longer seeing tomorrow, how devastating that is. I get it. It's like, it's hard. So, I'm not going to get too preachy about it because I'm still trying to wrap my head, and I don't want to, have the whole intro be I want a little bit upbeat. So there's no really good transition, but Claudia and I talked about this during our interview, and it was great to hear her perspective on it, because you could talk to people that also look like you, but you also want to talk to people that don't look like you to really get their perspective, get their views. So it was nice to get her views and perspective on not just the Asian hate that was experienced in Atlanta, but also Black Lives Matter throughout the whole world. And we talked about her so I met Claudia through the CEO of my current work. She is his daughter, so I talked with her for a few minutes, and I heard that she did some podcasting as an internship and also some podcasting for school. So I thought, hey, let's get her on the show. Let's talk to her about her podcasting experience. So I was very happy and it was a fun conversation. I just remember, there wasn't a moment where I didn't feel like there was a dip. I felt the energy was up the whole time, so that was a lot of fun. So before you head off into that chat, for those of you that have listened or watched the show for a little bit, I was plugging a mock draft, but then I stopped because I think I was putting too much thought into it. But the spark has come back where I can just kind of condense it, because I was trying to be too analytical, but I found a way I could just put like 2 sentences, call it good. So keep an eye out for my mock draft, probably my one and only, coming out, I want to say soon, because now that I can be shorter and be okay with that, I feel like I can just hit the bullet points and then just kind of complete it like that. It was just such a weird year to do any mock drafts, because there's some opt-outs, and then there's some people that really did well in 2020 that you think maybe could do well in the NFL, but could it just be that they're just maybe going against not so top tier talent because the defensive top guy was out also because of COVID? So to stay in the loop for any episode releases and creative content from KC Media and myself, follow KC Media 13 on both Instagram and Twitter, Conluque Media on Facebook, and you can find all video versions of every episode that I do on YouTube under Keoni Chats. So follow, subscribe, and also the audio versions are available all over your audio platform. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast, and Amazon Podcast. I believe those are the main ones I could think of off the top of my head. However you are listening to this episode in whatever platform you prefer, or if you're watching this on YouTube, I hope you enjoy my chat with Claudia Bueermann. This is a rarity for the Keoni Chat show where I have it's about once in a few kind of moments where I get a podcast host to be a podcast guest. A couple of weeks ago it was Ashmere. Now it's Claudia Bueermann. Claudia, how are you doing on this lovely Sunday? And I don't know how the weather is up there for you, but how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm based in Walla Walla, Washington, which is right in the sort of southeast corner of Washington, kind of like tucked right into Oregon and Idaho, like nestled right into that corner. And it's beautiful here. Like it is full on spring. All the cherry trees are out, like all the hyacinths, like the grounds are like covered in violets. It's so springy. So went for a nice run this morning. I'm doing great.
Okay.
But thank you so much for having me on the show. It's always so exciting to see, like you said, to see how other podcasters like have their setup and, run their show. And so it's so wonderful to like get to experience that from the other side.
Yeah. And so spring, I have really bad allergies. Do you get that as well? Or how do you manage that?
I do. And my allergies used to be a lot worse, but Walla Walla has like a pretty large bee population. And so there are tons of beekeepers here. And so I get my honey from someone who lives 2 doors down from me. And that's helped so much with my seasonal allergies, which I totally thought was a wives' tale. Yeah. Like eating honey from your area helped, but like it helps you sort of ingest pollen, I guess. There's some biology going on in there. And it totally got rid of my seasonal allergies.
Yeah, because like I heard about that, and then I heard about like taking a shot of apple cider. No, that could be something else. But so when it comes to the honey, for example, let's use that. What's the best way? Do you just take like a tablespoon, or you like mix it with water, or you just tea?
I'm like in my tea, on my oats. Like okay. I'm a big snacker. Multiple times a day. Anytime I'm like ever so slightly bored, like I'm right at the cabinet looking for a snack. And so like if I can put honey on it, I'm pretty pleased. So
yeah, and like all the healthier snacks, which there's a bike in the backdrop for you, and then you just said you're running, so obviously health and fitness is something you're very much into. Yeah, a lot of the healthy snacks you can't put honey on, like oats, like oatmeal, and then something else I'm probably forgetting, fruits.
Yeah, exactly. But at this point, like I've really figured out that like I really just like eating. As long as I'm like feeling good, I'll kind of eat whatever. Like I ate an entire bag of Cadbury eggs yesterday because I was like, I might as well munch. Like went for a bike ride yesterday. I was like, I earned this massive bag of like 12 servings of Cadbury eggs.
Yeah, but there you go.
Different than like the nutritious honey on oats, flax seeds, and a little different.
I mean, you're proteining up to the T with all that eggs.
Yeah, sure.
There you go. So I remember the first time I ever heard about Walla Walla was that Burgerville had their commercials for Walla Walla onion rings. That got so annoying because they would say Walla Walla over and over and over again, at least like 4 or 5 times in the commercial. I don't know if you were there when that commercial came out. Did that garner more attention to Walla Walla? Like did more people start flooding into the town?
Yeah, our onions definitely, help put us on the map. We're like a pretty small rural town, population like a little over 30,000. And then there are 50,000 people in our county. I might need to fact check my numbers on that. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we're like a very small, really rural town, like, one hospital. There are like 4 coffee shops here. Like, it's pretty small. And so having so much publicity from Burgerville about the onions, like our, like, in Walla Walla, sweet onions travel all over the country. And when it's harvest season, like, and you're driving down the road, there are trucks going by with, filled to the brim with onions. And on all of the sharp corners, there are onions like spilled onto the road. So like, it's a big thing to like stop and like collect your onions off the side of the road, which like I know now makes us sound like, such like small hillbilly town, like gotta get our onions off the road. But like, Burgerville helped in some ways to like, bring attention to Walla Walla, but also the wine industry. There's like a really flourishing wine industry. It's like was just named sort of the next Napa in like a couple of different magazines. There are 148 wineries here in town. And it's just an incredible place for agriculture, and especially like primarily for onions and grapes and then wheat.
Yeah.
So big agriculture community. But
does Walla Walla have any kind of like town motto? Because I feel like with you guys having onions, it should be like Walla Walla, the place where you'll cry happiness or tears of joy or something like that.
I think you should write to town council. Like, I think they're missing a huge opportunity.
They really are.
The like running joke is like Walla Walla, place so great they named it twice. But that's like
that's okay. That's all right.
It's okay, but I feel like you'll be so happy you're crying.
Yes.
Something
You'll be having
there.
tears of joy because this will be your new home. It's, sure.
Yeah, Keoni, I think you have a new a gig waiting for you as a podcaster and a PR small town person.
I mean, this is what the creative degree is for, right? Just just gotta use it to its fullest.
Yeah, find your spots.
Yeah, exactly. So, you are a born and raised Oregonian, though. So, what was it about? Right, Oregonian. Right?
Actually, yeah. I grew up kind of moving around all over. I grew up in Boston. And then moved to Southern California. But then I landed in Oregon and fell in love with the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. So can you kind of map out where have you been? So Boston, California, is there anything in between those stops, or is it just kind of all flowy?
Not really. Pretty flowy. My parents we had a 1980s like 50-foot RV. Like, shag maroon carpet, white fake leather couches. Like, it was a
disco ball in the back.
Yeah, basically. And we spent every summer living in this RV. And so like school would get out, and then down in Southern California, specifically like in the Coachella Valley, it's so blisteringly hot that my parents were always like, all right, kids, you're done with school. Like, get in the RV, we're leaving. And so we would spend like 3 months out of the year living on the road, year after year. And so although we were based in California, like we spent, a good chunk of the year, like driving around, living in this huge RV, like bus. And then from there, after that, like we moved up to Oregon.
Yeah. What would you say, like, was there a specific moment, or just like the closeness of your family? How much did it grow when having those kinds of trips together every summer?
Oh, so much. Like all of our like running family jokes are all centered around, like getting the motorhome like stuck in like some low-hanging trees, or like getting it stuck in some mud, or like my sister and I running and like playing with the kids that like live full time at these like boondock RV parks, like, that are like hundreds of miles away from anything, like getting to play with them. And all of those memories are like so strong, and our family like really prioritized like time together. And I think that that's something that's like I've been so appreciative of now that I'm older. And when we return back and spend time with them, like that's having that foundation growing up was super cool to have that, and like getting to see that now.
Yeah. So your sister, I have met her also. Her name is Gretchen, correct?
Nice. Yeah. Nice.
Yes.
Memory.
I from the short interaction I had with her, she is actually in Europe. So what were your thoughts when she made that announcement that she was going to go to Europe, and how are you feeling now that she's like more, you don't see her as often, and also a
Yeah.
different time zone?
Yeah, that's a big one too. Like when I get up, she's off to bed. But Gretchen, she like works the coolest jobs, and her position, she's living in Switzerland, and her position there actually shifted. She was living in Nigeria for a while, in a really small town in northern Nigeria. And so honestly, like I was pretty excited to have her like be placed in and be stationed out of Switzerland at this point, mostly just because like she's getting to go like leave and do so many more things that she wasn't necessarily like able to do when she was in Nigeria. And like there's also like a comfort level too that comes with that. And so but we've always pretty much she's 6 years older than I am, and
Oh,
so
you're the younger.
I'm the younger. Yeah, I'm the
Oh,
taller, which is a lot more important. But
that's
yeah.
also the very deceiving fact. It's like, yeah, you're taller, and I was just like, oh, so you
Yeah.
just blew my mind slightly.
Yeah, Gretchen is a lot older than me. And so it's like on one hand, it's hard having her so far away, but on the other, like we haven't really lived in the same house since,
Mm.
for so long, for like at least the last 10 years. We haven't like lived in the same spot.
Yeah,
So
and granted, the condition of the world is like traveling is a possibility, but kind of hard to at least leave the country. Now,
yeah.
back before, were you just thinking, "Oh, cool, she's in Switzerland. I got a place to stay. All
Yeah,
right, let's go
exactly.
party."
Kind of. I was like, okay, we're all set. Like I'm gonna be able to scoot over there, and so, but yeah, things have gotten a little trickier. But she's sending photos of her like amazing life, getting to hang out and ski and eat chocolate, whatever they do in
Yeah,
Switzerland.
yeah.
So I'm getting to live vicariously through that.
So I have kind of taken jealousy as I mean, jealousy can easily be a negative, and can also, for me at least, be a positive. Because, for example, like when it came to working for Nike, I was like, I went to the employee store, I saw my friend working there, and I was like, why can't I do that? I'm a little jealous that she has that. I'm gonna go get it, and I got it. For you,
Nice.
when Gretchen sends you these photos, was there any bit of like jealousy of like, I hate that she has this, but I'm so happy I'm gonna go get this also?
I guess like in some ways, yes, but also since she's my sister, like there's just that like wonderful,
Yeah.
heartwarming is such an overused word, but it's almost like a glow. You're like, man, my sibling is doing a really cool, like badass thing,
Yeah.
and you can only be proud of them.
That's true.
And on the other side, like I've really discovered since living in Walla Walla, like I love being in a small town. I love being in a pretty rural spot. And she lives in a huge city, and like it, our lives are so different in so many ways that there are just so many parts of my life that I'm like so in love with and so happy when I wake up in the morning that I'm stoked that she's getting to do these things, but also I wouldn't necessarily trade
Yeah.
anything that I have going on.
Yeah.
So I think that helps maintain like a healthy, like, oh man, you're skiing in some pretty rad spots, but like I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got this awesome like Alps, but you know what? I got this great mountain right over there, which I can, shred up and know to a T.
Exactly.
So, granted, I'm not going to be secretive about COVID being a thing. It's still a thing. I mean, vaccines and better management is being implied and working. So, when it was kind of big around this time last year, how was it having her this far away, and also you being away from your mom and dad, which are still down here in Oregon?
Yeah, I mean, it was super challenging. I was a senior in college, and second semester, couple months to go, and that's like already a really pivotal, like really emotionally tumultuous time where so many things around you are changing. Everyone is leaving. Everyone that you've known and grown close to for the last 4 years is all, everyone's gonna splinter off and go totally different directions. So in a normal world, like that's already like a hard thing to process. And then with COVID coming along in March, really, like I think we just had our, exact 1 year anniversary.
Yeah,
if you
happy
will.
anniversary.
Happy COVID anniversary. Um, but like with that coming around, like I still had my thesis, I still had huge components of school to be thinking about, but I also like was about to enter this like very transitional time. And so being scattered from family was super hard. And Gretchen had just moved to Switzerland in like late February. And so she got there, moved into her apartment, and then they were like, okay, like don't leave your apartment, we'll drop food off, like, welcome to this new country where no one,
Yeah.
like stay inside. And so like for both her going through this really intense transitional point of moving to like new city, new country, new continent, and like being in a new job, and I was going through this like huge transitional point as well, and then having COVID going on, yelling in the background. It was so helpful to have her, even though we were so far apart. Like it was so helpful to have her there as someone that I could like pick up the phone and FaceTime in the morning or in the evening and just like touch base about how things were going.
Yeah.
So really important to have that connection.
Yeah. And then were you guys ever comparing notes on like, okay, so this is how America's doing. How's it going over there?
Oh,
Can
all
I
the
come?
time.
Can I come over there, please?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like even but just between towns, like the way we're handling it here in Walla Walla is different than like how Portland is handling it. And so like I feel like there's always a sense of, comparing like, oh, like we're doing this, like we're at this stage, like this is how many cases we have. And so yeah, there was always a component of like,
Yeah.
what's Switzerland doing? Like what's going on with this? Both from like a, pure curiosity, like rubbernecking of like, well, what are they doing? But
Yeah.
also a component of like, I want to know that like my sibling is safe in this, what at the time like felt like the end of the world.
Yeah, I just remember like when this was all kind of getting rolled out. I get not really rolled out. It's just getting in the early stages of COVID. I was a big Walking Dead fan. I still am. So I was like, well, this is how it all starts.
Yeah.
And right now, I live next to a cemetery, so I was like, this is great. This is fantastic.
You're like, I've been making notes over the seasons.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna. What do I grab first to leave? What can I use as a weapon just in case? But
Yeah.
the
How am I
dude-
barricading the door?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm on the second floor, so I mean, I can have at least off the ground. So something.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, with everything rolling, starting to get, better as far as like vaccines, like I just said, are you starting to think about going to go visit her?
I am. I actually, I just decided pretty recently in the last couple of weeks that I'm going to move to Maine come June, which I'm excited
Wow.
about. That's where my boyfriend's family is based out of. And so he and I are going to move over to be a little closer to them. But a couple of days ago, I was like, oh, Google flights, like at that point, like once you're on the East Coast, like flying from New York to France, flying from New York to Europe is the same distance and same amount of time it takes to fly New York to Portland.
Really?
Essentially. Yeah, it's like 6-ish hours both directions. And so at that point, like, he and I have been making that commute back to the East Coast for the last 4 years to go visit his family, that it's like, getting on a flight for that much time is not as bonkers of an idea as it is from flying from the West Coast. So
It's always that first time you're just like, I don't know how this is gonna go. How do I plan?
exactly.
That's like when I was driving from Eugene to Portland, like my first time in college. I was just like, okay, I think I could do this drive in a couple hours. I think if I have to use the bathroom, there's there. And then once I got done, I was like, wow, that was easy. And then
It's not even a thought to do that drive a bit.
Yeah. And then I kept getting like it's shorter, like an hour or like 2 hours, an hour, like 45, an hour and a half. And then my mom's like, are you speeding? I was like, no, not that I will tell you out loud.
I'll just text you a little after I get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How was finishing school during the COVID era?
Super anticlimactic.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, graduation is totally, I think, more for the parents than it is for students. Like, they've both monetarily like made this huge investment, and they've like, it's sort of the like the final step in a lot of ways, for folks that choose to take that route. Like, this like is sort of the ceremonial, like your kids going out into the world. And for college kids who are graduating, like it is also the sort of mental acknowledgement of like, okay, I've done this thing, like now I'm moving on, and like, I'm becoming I'm like gonna move into the world now and be an adult. And so not having that, and not having any type of like real separation of like, okay, this is school, this is not school. Like, you're working, now you're done, was really challenging. We had like a live streamed on YouTube graduation that was like a PowerPoint basically, where like our name would flash up with our like photo ID.
Yeah.
And it was
That's
like
an actual photo that you can submit like they did in high school for
it was like the picture that was on your freshman ID that you had all 4 years, and it was like Claudia Bueermann, great job. And like, and so it was challenging because it's like this monumental event that's going on that you're not necessarily like, there isn't like there isn't the ceremony around it. But at the same time, like I was trying to write my thesis, and I was making a podcast for that, and all of the interviews, all of the site visits I had planned, like everything went, just crumbled. And so that was back in the phase where it was like, we're not trying to figure out what to do. It was just in the like canceled phase where it was like, see you next year. Like, we're canceling this, like we'll check back in next year. And at least now we're doing like, so many things are like, we're having this event virtually, you can do this thing virtually. But at that point, like not everyone was as comfortable with Zoom or, whatever video platform is your choice. And so everything was just like canceled, done. Like so many of my finals were canceled. Like it was just, sort of just magically this ending in like April. With everything. So it was just so much readjustment to my thought process.
Because when last June was going to be my high school 10-year anniversary, so that got canceled, and then I don't know if it's going to happen again this year, but we're going to have to combine it with the class of 2011's high school graduation. So it's like, okay, let's see how it goes.
Yeah, some weird lumping. And
yeah, because I even brought it up to like, because we have like a little Facebook page. I was like, do we want to do like a giant Zoom meeting, since we can't all be having this? And then they're like, oh, we're actually going to plan for next year. I was like, good luck, guys. Good luck.
Whoa.
Let's see if this actually happens. But I always try to be a half glass full kind of person. For you in general, how do you view the world? Half full, half empty?
Oh, I'm totally mostly full. Like, there's so few. I'm just like a pretty happy person in general.
I could tell. Just not just an interview, but just like when a couple times I've seen you in person, always a hopscotch and a hop, skip, and a step. Yeah, I think that's
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like even this morning, I was like, wickedly out of breath on my run, and I was still like, wow, look at those flowers. Like, oh my God, look at that dog. And it's so much more fun to have that mindset than it is to just be dwelling.
So during this last year and a little bit over, with everything COVID, what were some of the silver linings that came out of this for you?
Yeah, actually, when everything happened, I moved out of my house. I was living at the time in like a classic college house, that was like falling apart. And I lived with 5 other girls, and I moved out of that house and moved into my boyfriend's house to contain contamination between houses. Because at that point, like no one really knew how contagious, that was in the like pure panic phase. And a couple other folks also moved into that house. So there were 9 of us living in a 4-person house with like 3 full bedrooms and a renovated basement and 1 bathroom. And so there were like 9 of us in this house. And at first it was like sheer chaos and like, kind of as bad as it sounds saying it out loud. But truly the like full silver lining of this last year is that I have made like the closest relationships I've ever had, because like, living, and I'm sure that like a lot of people who are now reflecting back on what this last year has looked like are like really reevaluating like their relationships with the people around them, and the folks that like they've had to spend so much time with over this last year. And it was so meaningful to get to spend this like pretty disappointing end of a like very large thing of like college coming to a close. And they were all juniors, so they were all a year behind me.
Mhm.
And they like threw me a graduation in a like an alpine meadow where we were climbing. They like made me a handmade cap and gown, like put on a ceremony. And things like that are things that I would not trade for anything. Like I wouldn't even trade that for a real graduation. And so like having memories like that have been pure silver linings on everything.
Yeah, I mean, the creativity that's come out of this is like, I can't go buy. I mean, I can go buy this like hand knit beanie, for example, from this company, and also like the shift towards small businesses. Also, I feel like got more focused. So like I can go get this hand knit beanie from Walmart, or I can go get it from, let's say, like Portland Gear, for example, and then next thing you know, I could actually learn how to make it myself. And then it's like everyone's learning new creative ways. It's like, what?
It is so cool to watch like how both how much people are open to learning things right now, because they've like discovered that like how to spend time with themselves, I think, and like what they're interested in, and that like you can always be a learner and you can always be a beginner. And so it's been cool to see how folks are using that time.
Yeah.
Keoni Chats is proudly sponsored by Vibes Training. So Dylan Vibes is a good friend and former guest of the show. And when Dylan did his time as the trainer for one of these big time gyms and then went off to become his own man, his own business, I knew I wanted to help him out. I wanted to promote his work and tell you guys that he is very energetic. He's very creative, and he's he's the goofy, lovable guy that that he's going to put you through a workout, but he's going to also do the workout with you and have fun with it too. So check him out. Follow him on Instagram. It'll be Vibes Training PDX. And then if you want to sign up for his services where you can be a part of his community that he's starting to build, go to vibestraining.com, click on the blue button on the top of the screen, get registered, and then once you're registered, it'll prompt you to download the app where you'll have a plethora of workouts ranging from 5 to 60 minutes, and you could go as little as nothing at all needed, or you can go to some bands, dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells. He's even done some workouts with backpacks, which is very unique. And I remember talking to him saying that he wants to make workouts available for people that don't have those equipment that other people have. So like if you have a step stool, you can do some lunges with that step stool. So check him out. Go to vibestraining.com, click on the blue button at the top of the screen, register, get the app, start working out, and get Vibes Fit today.
I want to go back to that keyword you just dropped in a minute, but yeah, it's for me, when it came to the pandemic, it's like granted it kind of sucked because like on that tail end I was dealing with a breakup, so I was like, get to go dive into single life as COVID was becoming more active. So that was rough, but then the turning point was just trying to figure out like, okay, now that I have a way, like Zoom became introduced to me through my work, I was like, so I can record interviews now. And I can actually like afford some of these equipments because I'm not going out to buy things anymore or going out to like food. So it was kind of like a buildup of like, okay, sweet, awesome, yes, things are working out great. My sucks that I still can't go meet people in public, but that's okay. That's all right.
And I'm sure that like this has allowed you to kind of expand the folks that you get to talk to, because so many more people are like really comfortable, like are so much more comfortable with Zoom and like getting online and like talking to their little computer. And that I bet that like kind of helps you expand who you're able to connect with.
Oh yeah, I mean you're in Washington. I've talked to people on the East Coast. I've talked to people in Texas. So it's like, yeah, it's expanding. I don't think I can reach Gretchen, unfortunately. That's just gonna be too tricky,
Yeah.
100% too tricky. So the thought will always be there, like maybe she's a little down the line.
Yeah.
So before we move on to your next phase of your life, you did some pretty cool things. So my normal, for the people that have been listening or watching the show, they know like I do a deep dive on people's social media until I get these like facts I want to talk to you about. You actually have a pretty extensive Google search. So we talked about this before the recording, how kind of crazy it is. But one thing that kind of stood out to me, we did talk about allergies, because of spring. You started I guess a lifeline called Tether, which is
Mhm.
caused after you had a very serious allergy reaction. Can you tell me what happened there then?
Yeah, I am seriously allergic to citric acid, which is in
Oh.
like annoyingly a lot of things. Um and and so with that, it was kind of a building allergy. Like I, had like got hives at first, but like would still contently eat, a whole bag of cutie clementines and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna like have a hive on my arm or whatever. And just over the years, it like really turned into something a lot more serious. And so when I was in high school, there was a program called Startup Camp, which basically took students from all over the Portland school districts, put them all together for a weekend. It's so funny to talk about things that could happen in like the pre-COVID world. But like everyone all came together, and then folks that ran startups all over the West Coast came the first year just from kind of the Portland area, like later on just from the Pacific Northwest. And then years following, people from all over would come in to help these students. And your job as a student was to pitch an idea to the whole collective of students. Pitch your idea for your company, and then assemble a team, and then build that startup. And then at the end of it, you pitched it to a team of investors for real money. Like you pitched it to a panel, and almost Shark Tank-esque, like they kind of bid on your idea if they liked it, and then would put real capital behind that. And so I had a serious serious allergic reaction, and I didn't have anything around me. Like I didn't have any Benadryl, I didn't have my EpiPen, I had nothing, because I'm generally kind of forgetful person. Like I'm like just like bouncing around, and left the house, didn't take anything with me. And so from that, I realized that, and from talking to other people that had serious allergies, I discovered that was like a really common thing that was happening. And so Life Tether was like the idea that I pitched, and that was a basically a Bluetooth sticker, that, or a box that you could carry around, that would tell your phone, and it would alert you when you got too far away from your medicine to get back to your medicine. And so that like applies for folks that use inhalers, folks that use insulin pumps, whatever life-saving medical device that you carry, having something on your person. And so, but at the same time, like getting to build that was sort of my first introduction to the startup community, and to like get it to public speaking and to management. And we ended up winning. And so got some like investment capital to go behind that. And unfortunately, it's no longer, life as a high schooler like carries on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I learned so much from that, about needing to carry my EpiPen, but also like, from all sorts of like other components that go into running a startup.
Yeah, someone that has pretty bad hay fever, allergies, and then with asthma, and then also a part of that is just like dry eyes. It's like, oh, I remember when I was younger, I was kind of dumb and be like, oh yeah, I have my inhaler. When people ask me, and in reality, I'm like, no, I don't.
I don't.
I made a really dumb mistake. But to hear that you kind of had this idea to bring a Bluetooth kind of feature to things that have no technology whatsoever, that's just awesome. That's freaking cool.
Thank you. It's it feels like a huge sector that's kind of been left behind, especially with kids. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, kids can't even remember like their lunch or like where they put their jacket. Like, how are you going to trust them with this thing that, you know, even adults kind of struggle with to remember how to, you know, manage and carry things around. So
Yeah. To
Yeah.
some degree, I always thought, like, what if I had, like, you know, those long keychain zipline things? Yeah.
zip it
Yeah.
out. Got my inhaler.
Either that or get like a Velcro like belt and just like put a Velcro strap around your inhaler and just stick it on there and like make sure that does not leave your waist until you need
Yeah.
it.
I think you need to be like older with a lot more confidence in that, you know, like that's a recipe for disaster for like an insecure 12-year-old, but like got my zipped on inhaler, like
Oh God, I think it's hilarious how like some of those like dorky things we thought of when we were like kids, it's just like now so big. Everyone's like, "Oh, dude, that's so cool! It's so retro."
yeah.
It's like, calm down.
Like those big champion sweatshirts that I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I hated wearing those to school. And my mom was like, I bought you the sweatshirt, you're gonna wear it. And now they're like, you know, so cool, so hip.
Yeah. Yeah, because like my brother is selling our old Pokemon cards and he's actually making fairly good money. And it's
Whoa.
like, what? I mean, I took some of those photos. Can I get like 1%, 2%?
That's awesome. But yeah, it's wild to see what folks will buy and like are
Yeah.
interested in.
Yeah. So for you to get Life Tether up and going and then run it during your time in high school, correct? That's when this was. So you are the daughter to a CEO. So that's how much advice did so to get a little backstory. I work with Claudia's dad and her dad is the CEO of the company I work for. So how much support, how much guidance did he give you as you were running this? Or was he just like, make your own mistakes, go run?
Yeah. Well, they were both of my parents were both there as like guiding mentors for all of the students. Like they were
Okay.
some of the folks that had signed on like to help out and like, you know, be there as like, you know, we're CEOs, like, you know, we did something, like we have advice to give. And so and my parents are like big, like, you know, you don't get a leg up on things, you know, you have to work and earn what you do.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they're like helping other teams and I was like, hey guys, like, you know, what about me? And so
You know how I share your last name? Come on, help
yeah,
me out
exactly.
here.
Like, does this mean nothing? But at the same time, like, you know, getting to watch both of my dad, is a CEO, and then my mom runs like a pretty successful chain of fast food restaurants, and then is also on the board for a school in Portland. And so, like from there, getting to watch them, like they are the hardest workers I've ever met, and have instilled so much of their work ethic and so much of their like you know, what do you mean you hit a roadblock, like there's always a solution. And so having like getting to have that attitude, especially like both during Life Tether, but like, you know, that applies to all of life and like to school and to looking for jobs and like my current job situation, like having their encouragement of like, you know, there is always there's always something that, you know, you could be working on, that you can be doing, like, you know, what's the 1 year, 5 year, 10-year idea. Like I've gained so many invaluable lessons from both my dad, like in his CEO capacity, and then in my mom, like in her management capacity.
At some point, are you just like, because I have the same kind of like this path I get to go down where like I think too far ahead and then next thing you know I do forget about the present, you know, with her or your dad saying like, what's your 5 year, 10-year, 15-year, are you just like, well, okay, guys let me just make it to next month, please?
Oh my gosh, especially right now where I'm like, you can't plan anything.
Yeah.
But my dad and I were having a long conversation about FP and
Mhm.
and so on one hand, like, you know, I get really excited to think about the big picture. But on the other hand, like I need to, especially this year, like while I've been in like, you know, between jobs and figuring out what I'm going to do, I've been really working hard to sort of rewire my brain to be okay with the present and be okay with what I'm doing, and that like it's okay to sit and like read my book at 2:00 in the afternoon on Tuesday.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't constantly need to be like, okay, and like here's this crazy person map of like, you know, strings attached to stuff like, and then I'll do this thing and then I'll do this thing, because I don't know right now. Like
Yeah.
it's so hard to plan, and it's so hard to like be entering adulthood in the COVID era. And I mean, it's hard COVID for everyone. But
But
like
just entering the adult world in general is very
exactly.
difficult. So I mean, it's nice. It's great that you have two parents that are in that kind of higher echelons of like management that can help you, like not like completely guide you to success, but like at least get you going properly. I think that's what all parents want to do: just get their kids going.
They just want to give them a helpful shove.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm not a parent. I'm a parent to plants. I'm a parent to some
Nice.
kids. I'm sorry, not kids. A parent to some cats. There you go.
Okay.
I was like, that would completely
It's
negate
like,
what
whoa,
I just said. Whoops. Oops. So yeah, and so when you graduated school and you left Whitman with an anthropology and geology major, you know, before COVID, and as you're heading into that last year, what did you think that your job would have been with those two degrees?
Yeah, and I mean, this also was super related to what I did all of my research and my thesis on, but I'm really interested in working with land management agencies, and that's kind of what I was thinking about heading into. I spend a lot of time outside, and I'm so interested in like looking at things from like an indigenous side of, in terms of like whose land are we actually on, you know, whose land like are we recreating on, and because for a lot of folks in the outdoor community, they don't necessarily like fully process, you know, the land, like, and the history behind that land. And so I was picturing myself going into a position that was like helping mediate that tension. And but at the same time, like places that do that and land management agencies, there was just this like all across the board sort of not necessarily hiring freeze, but just that like roles like that kind of seemed to drop off the map. Like they weren't the most crucial things that needed to be going on at that point. And at the same time, like I was saying, like I think a lot of people got to spend the last year getting to reevaluate what they want to do and what's meaningful and impactful. And so I've gotten to spend a ton of time getting to reevaluate what types of companies I want to work for, what sort of my purpose is with both with my degree, but how I want to feel really fulfilled with what I'm doing.
What is your purpose?
Well,
how long do we have?
I know. I think as someone who, like, I love people, I really do. And I think that like one of my things that I'm like most successful with in my day-to-day life and like in jobs is that like I can pretty much happily talk to anyone who will listen to me. Like I'm that person that you're annoyed with when you're in line at the grocery store who's like chatting with the cashier who's like just opened up all of a sudden because she's like, oh my God, I had to take my cat to the vet, things like that. Like yeah. I feel like I love talking to anyone that'll chat with me and like open up with me. And I think honestly that my main purpose in life is to like be able to help people, either if that means like getting to talk and process things, but also just like in a capacity where like I'm working with people and like making an impact in their daily life.
Yeah. And
okay.
you made it. We didn't run out of film because of that response.
I know, my palms are sweaty.
I'm like that too, where like, just with this podcast, for example, like I've been able to really open up and been able to really like share things with people, which is like, if you were to meet me and like talk with me like a year ago, I guess a little bit over a year ago, they'll be like, okay, he's kind of just like top layer kind of person. It's like, what's the second layer? What's the third layer? What's the fourth layer? It's like, oh, I know how to dig deeper now. Oh, cool. This is fun. Digging's fun. I like dirt.
I like getting in and being able to like have folks not just chatting with you on the like, very like, what they're okay with opening up about. But, making sure that like every person that you engage with feels like you are coming to the table like interested in them and like who they are, and that like it's okay to abandon just to stop and head down into the dirt, like keep digging.
Yeah. And so, your thesis, which I just want to touch base real quick on you. So it was, I guess, so I was trying to find it. I was trying to see if I can read it. So it was available in your Whitman library, but I have to like actually check it out.
Whoa.
And I was like, I don't want to go. I have to check it out, but I have to also pick it up. I was like, I'm okay. So the title I was able to find for your thesis was Protecting Public Lands, Outdoor Recreation on Sacred Spaces, Finding Mutual Uses and Value. What was the most eye-opening thing you discovered as you were working on this thesis?
I discovered that so much of the land that I climb and ski and mountain bike and trail run, like, and raft, like all of these places that I spend a lot of my time, like have such a both, I mean, of course, have like a really deep history with the tribes that use that area and that are native to that area and that space, but at the same time, like there's such a deep history in terms of the land management that the US has put on that land that I was just so oblivious to, like that it's information that I only learned after months of digging and research and like reading obscure articles and old books and like, founding of X national forest and like, oh, here's this, recording or transcript of a conversation that happened in the 70s about an argument that happened over this land. And none of that information is accessible. Like none of that information, you go out for a hike and like, that's not the information that's posted on your little, like, pack your trash in and out, please. Like, watch out for snakes. Like, this like complex history about land is nowhere near our normal rhetoric. Right. And so that was one of the primary things that I encountered and like really had to face and talk about and give a lot more energy to digging into. And that feeling of being uncomfortable with your actions, of like, I use this land without knowing the history behind it.
Yeah. Sorry, allergies. I didn't want
you're good.
I didn't want to sniffle on camera or through the mic. That'll be just way too loud and way too gross. Yeah. So when we first had our conversation together, and I heard about what your thesis is, or just something you're working on, it really reminded me of one of my earlier podcast guests, who's also a great friend. His name is Adam. He is a Native American representative within the government. He does more, but that's kind of like the overarching role he plays. So I know that he travels to tribes, I want to say like as far south as Salem, and I think as far north as like a little bit into Washington. As far as for Walla Walla, how's the Native American representation there as far as like the sites? Is there a lot, or is there just not a whole lot, or is this kind of just like a town just built out of nothing?
Yeah, I mean, Walla Walla is a pretty historically interesting spot. It's home to the Fort Walla Walla, which is basically Marcus Whitman, who was like he was a doctor who was sent over to like be a doctor, and his wife Narcissa was sent over to act as a teacher for the Cayuse, the Nez Perce, and the Umatilla Indians, who now go under they are now the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, so the CTUIR, which is primarily down in Pendleton area, which is in Oregon technically. But Walla Walla has like all of these things that are like homages to Marcus Whitman, who was this like white settler man who like came in and was like, okay, I'm gonna heal all you guys. And there was what's known as the Whitman Massacre, which was where 5 Cayuse men came and killed Marcus Whitman and his family out of, and there's like this very complex, tumultuous history behind that, but that history is written all over Walla Walla, based on like all of the, our largest hotel here is called the Marcus Whitman. There's like a statue of him in the middle of downtown.
You went to Whitman College?
Whitman, I go to Whitman College, or I went
Yeah.
to Whitman College. Yeah, like the building was named after one of the buildings I lived in. One of the years was named after Narcissa. You know, it's this very layered, very complex history, and the tribes are so close. You know, they do so much, both here in Walla Walla and like in the other surrounding towns as well. And then they have the Temescal Cultural Institute, which is based down in Pendleton, so Oregon again.
Mhm.
But there's so much there's like is a continuous conversation about like the land we're on, like who used to live here, and how this like pretty gnarly history between the Whitmans and the CTUIR peoples, like what that conflict looked like. And so that's this continuing conversation, which is really cool to get to be surrounded by that.
Yeah. So as you're talking, I was just thinking that I remember when I was younger thinking Columbus Day is just like a holiday, sort of, where we get to like just hang out and maybe or have the day off. I don't know. But then as I got older and older, I was just realized like there's a lot of like negative stigmatism or just like the whole Columbus Day like celebration. It's very much like in the false area as far as like we're celebrating this guy who slaughtered a bunch of Indians or Native Americans, and we should not be celebrating him. What when you started college and you started learning about all this, started working on your thesis, did you ever think about Columbus Day, that whole celebration, and just be like, this really screwed up?
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned way at the beginning of our chat, I grew up on the East Coast and lived there for a really long time. And on the East Coast, like Columbus Day is a big thing. Like, yeah, we always had school off. It was like Christopher Columbus Day leading up to it, especially in 2020, where we're like getting to have really challenging conversations and we're being asked, like, we're asking people to like be uncomfortable with truth and like with like recontextualizing the past, especially being at Whitman and being at like a small liberal arts school, like that lent so much space to be able to like have really challenging conversations that make you, as like a white woman, that like make me always and continuously remember that like I can talk as long as I want, but like I have years of learning to do, and so like of course like we should not be honoring Christopher Columbus for like arriving and saying that like he was the first person on this land, when we know for a fact that there are, and especially in like an anthropology context, like there are thousands of years of history on this land. Like how could we ever want to like say that like this one guy who showed up who was like, booyah, this is all mine, and so and getting to have those really challenging conversations made me get to confront like why this is an issue.
Yeah, I really feel that this past year and a little bit over, it really showed people that it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to be like, I have no idea what you felt, or I have no idea how you feel, but I want to learn how. So that can be said, Black Lives Matter, and now, with Native Americans getting more attention, and then with what happened in Atlanta with the Asian culture or Asian community, like I kind of know of it. I didn't read too deeply into it. I just know like it's just like we're like all colors are now getting attacked, which it's like shouldn't we be loving each other? Shouldn't we be like working with each other? I feel like that's kind of on the down low when it comes to priority list now. Trying to be a team.
Yeah, exactly. And like having the conversation of recognition that like this happens on the daily to people, and like only with huge events like this that like garner national attention, like only in situations like that are like people who kind of get to be not part of the conversation, like that's the only time that they're like really confronted with, I think, what's going on around them, that they kind of get to have blinders up to. And so it's like events like this that are so tragic and yet are like come as like a quote unquote shock to a lot of people who like are kind of blind to what's going on, and so it's just like this continuous reminder that like there's a lot of learning that needs to happen.
I'm in Portland, and my people I interact with, even like prior to COVID, like they were all good with me. I never encountered anything to that extent. So when I hear about this happening in like other cities, I'm like, oh, that's a good point. And I never really, like when I try to think more like in detail, like if I had any experiences, like there's probably like maybe one or two that were like a little like very subtle, but they're, we were kids, so we don't
So,
know. We're just asking.
right.
So it's like I never really personally experienced it. So, try and dive in and try to like put myself in those shoes. It's so hard to do. It's like, oh man, I really should probably do more research or, read.
Yeah, and like especially from the context of like noticing for yourself that you need to do like, you need to plunge into something. I think that that's like a huge portion, like being comfortable telling yourself that like you don't know everything, and
Yeah.
like you don't know what's going on, and you don't know how to put yourself in other people's shoes. And so, like I said, like getting to go, I mean, of course colleges are like kind of hotspots for both PC culture, but also like being able to like have those conversations on a regular basis. I mean, for a huge, massive percentage of people that aren't in that space, like it's a thing that needs to be exercised, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that's a muscle that like if you feel like you can be complacent, you can't, and it's hard to remember that like that's something that needs to like constantly be, constantly be reading up on, constantly be having conversations where you're like, ooh, I need to admit that I don't know what's going on and I need to ask questions.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Keoni Chats is proudly sponsored by Cove Hard Yerba Mate. Josh Mackler is a former guest and owner of the business, and when he told me about his story and basically the birth of Cove, I wanted to try it. I was curious because A, I've seen the yerba mate yellow cans all through the stores, and B, how do you make that alcoholic? I was just more like natural curiosity was kicking in. So after the interview, he actually sent me a 24 pack, which included his 4 flavors of mango colada. We have a mojito, we have a lemonade, and then you have a berry flavor. So berry is my favorite of the 4, mainly because I like fruits. I like the kind of citrusy taste. It's crisp. It's also a little bit lighter. It's very much a summery drink. But, I'm doing a little shake and shimmy as I'm describing this because that's how it makes me feel when I describe that flavor and that Cove's hard yerba mate. So it was great to drink this and also know that it is low in the good spots as far as low calories, low carbs, and just makes it feel lighter because beer, for example, can make it feel very heavy. And I'm a beer drinker more than a wine drinker, so anything I can do to get a nice little buzz going while also showing off the tank top and also feeling light in the stomach, I'm all for it. Let's rock and roll. So if you want to try some of Josh's hard yerba mate, go to hardyerba.mate.com, HARDYERBAMATE.com. Shop around. So he's got some combos, or he's got some cans, and then if you also want to get some shirts, he has that available too. So before you check out, use a discount code Keoni Chats Cove, KEONICHATS KOVE for 25% off your total purchase. That's huge because when I talked to Josh, he gave me the discount code, and originally I thought I was like, okay, like 10-15% off, but I was like 25% off, holy smacks. So giant thank you to you, Josh, and the Cove people for sponsoring the show and letting me spread out the good word of Cove. So you must be 21 and over to order any hard alcohol from Josh, and you also just please enjoy responsibly.
There's a former football player who is now all over the media because of A, he's retired, and also B, he's like on ESPN. He's Emmanuel Acho. So he has a YouTube show called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. So I remember hearing that he had, the commissioner of NFL, Roger Goodell. Like I think I watched. I can't really fully remember if I watched all the way through because like I saw it and at work it's fine to like put some audio stuff in because it's so
Mhm.
quiet. And then he doesn't have a podcast platform, so I was just like, oh, I'll just put it
I just
underneath the monitor and just kind of listen and not really pay attention. But yeah, I just remember like he's really like stepping into that limelight of like having people onto a show that don't really know or they're in high profile spots and just talking to them about like what he has educated or what he's
Mhm.
learned when it comes to the African American community and Black community and what they're facing
Right.
right now. So for you, like, do you practice having these uncomfortable conversations with your friends before you approach strangers, or are you just like reading first and then just kind of whole string up all that info for when the time
Hmm.
comes?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of, especially, I mean, like I kind of keep harping on, like in a community that is centered or like in a college community, it's sort of this like very frequent conversation that comes up in terms of like especially like, being someone who like loves the outdoors and spends a lot of time outside, which like traditionally has been a pretty white space. Like having those conversations of like, how do you increase access, and like, having conversations that make you feel really uncomfortable and unhappy, not necessarily unhappy, but like make you feel unsettled because you're like, okay, I need to admit that like I don't know and I have a
Yeah.
lot of learning. um like that's where I do the most growing, and then from there I feel like that gives me a little bit of a direction to be like, okay, I need to like help learn and rewire and like rethink what I'm doing, and like how my actions, going back to what I said earlier about like my purposes of like, I want to like help the people around me, and if I'm not coming to the table like armed and with the information and like the about the people around me, then like how can I be that best ally?
Yeah. Even my mom, for example, she's like, son, you should do more research when it comes to things pertaining to your guests because you gotta make yourself sound like an expert. Not like, she said that the format I have now, it works, but she's like, doesn't hurt to be a little more educated. And I was like, that's good.
Huh.
I guess school never really does stop to some degree.
Yeah, you're always learning.
Could you say though
Always a
that,
beginner.
yeah, there it is. That's what I wanted to bring in. Oh, so I did mention in your intro that you are a podcast host. You are a podcast host of a show called The Beginners Project. You are about a couple episodes in, from what I remember. Where did that all come about? And also, how, like, where and how did this idea come to you?
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I'm a couple episodes in. I'm like plunging off the
Off
off
to the deep
into the
end.
deep end.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
I'm headed in and it's super scary and it's like so wild to put yourself out there. Which I'm sure you kind of felt when you were starting Keoni chats, but the idea really came out of the fact that when I got to school, like I didn't know anything about being outside, and Whitman has a really large, like pretty well-renowned outdoor program that does just incredible trips. They have classes. They have a huge rental shop. It's accessible to not just the school, but it's accessible like to the entire Walla Walla community. So it's this really cool entity. And I showed up and I just did not know like what was up and what was down, and kind of avoided it best I could. I was like really intimidated, not super interested in being outside. Um, and then I met this guy and I like super lied to him that I like was a dope skier and like climber. And then we started hanging out, and then like it was just mad trial by fire. And I had to be like, okay, yeah, I've like never put a backpack on my back. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know how to ski. Like, things that like some people grow up around. And if you don't, it's like sometimes kind of tricky uh to like be okay with starting. And so my entire friend group were all these like wild climbers. Like my boyfriend was a really competitive ski racer in high school, like is an incredible skier. They're all like big ice climbers. It's like a world that I had no idea what was going on. And
Yeah.
so I spent the last like 4 years being just so bad at stuff. Like I was a beginner at everything, and I'd be like, okay, cool. Like, I started, like, I'm doing something, and then the seasons would change and the sport would change, and I would be like right back into being bad at something again and being a beginner. But in that process, like, I learned so much about being okay with asking questions, with like being really vulnerable, and being a beginner is like really fun.
Yeah.
And I think people have gotten that figured out during COVID, because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm like going to start knitting, like you were saying, or like I'm going to start making sourdough, or like I'm going to learn a new language. Because like being a beginner, you're granted so much grace with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so that's really where the idea came from. I've been always like really curious what people are a beginner in, and it's been so cool to like hear what people are doing.
Yeah. So, and this, you're not a beginner when it comes to being on a podcast, because you've also had the Sacred Ascent as a show you hosted for a little bit, and then you just mentioned that as part of your thesis you did a couple podcast episodes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you have experience talking on a mic, and then also with your outgoing personality. It's kind of like a perfect marriage right there.
Yeah,
So,
anywhere I can just chat, I'm good.
so your second episode started out with, if I remember hearing this correctly, or if I remember correctly, that you lost a file that I think it was just like your intro file. And I've done that before. I've lost an episode. It's the worst feeling in the world. And for my show to be an interview based kind of show, it was just like scramble mode. I was like, oh God, what'd I do? So
I bet.
for you, when you like listen back and you think back to that mistake, like what are you growing upon after each taping, or each recording, I should say?
Yeah. I am just, like I was saying earlier, like trial by fire is, I guess, the way that I'm like living my life with things. I'm like, okay, we make a mistake and we learn from it. I will never make that mistake again.
Yeah.
And now I'm like really more organized with like where my files go, things like that, like little steps to help me along the way with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Has been so crucial, and I've learned so much from that. But it's been really funny to like listen back to, especially the intro to that episode, because it's just me. Like I called my boyfriend and I was like, I lost, I'm like sobbing into the phone, and he's like, what, like, have you been in a horrible car accident? Like, what's going on? And I was like, I lost my file. And, like, I was so upset in the moment, and I was like, like, this is that like frustrating, like so deeply annoying feeling of being a beginner, where you're like, I want to thrive, but like there are things I don't know how to do, and I am failing with that, and like being okay and meeting yourself with being like, okay, this is just what being a beginner is. And so I sat down and like recorded myself, and I was like, this is the dumbest thing, why am I recording myself crying? And I got so much great feedback from people who are like, oh, it's so wonderful to like hear you in this thing that you're a beginner at, struggling, because that's what it's like to be a beginner.
Yeah, it definitely is. And plus, you're still early in your podcast hosting this show. For example, you're the Beginners Project. You're still very young at it. You still have 2 episodes in. So when it comes to like taking risk, you have time to like learn what's going on and then apply it, so you know how to do it for the next one, which is, that's great, because for me right now, like I have like a date, I have like a schedule, I know exactly how much work I need to get done for this, but it's also like I want to like push it, I want to try something different. An example I used in my last episode, it's like, okay, so let's say I insert a photo, I use cross dissolve because it's easy, so it's like I want to figure out a new way to transition to a photo.
Yeah,
I want something different. So it's like trying to figure that out. And then I see like everyone, like a celebrity podcast host, their like YouTube show or YouTube version of their episode, have like this cool animation at the bottom of lower third of like their social media handles. I was like, I want to do that. So it's like, it's great that this is beginning where you can still figure out yourself. But then It's also like, for me, like, it's hard for me to like try to like figure something out new, but still try to fit it into the next episode, because it's like, it's just me.
Right. And yeah, you're kind of working within like wonderfully strict timelines, it seems like. that like keep you organized and keep your show organized, and like I'm sure that helps keep your brain organized.
Yeah.
Like in terms of sorting that out. But yeah, like making adjustments like that has to be like feel kind of risky, you know, because you're like, I have the recipe, you know, like I do my interview, you know, you put it up on your channel, like you put it out on platforms, and you know, that's been successful. And so I'm sure that like tweaking it has to be stressful to some degree, but
Oh yeah.
like one of the cool things that I learned that I feel like I guess could be applied in this situation. One of my interviews, someone was talking about how he was like, being a beginner is like acknowledging where you are. And he was like, you know, you're not a beginner until you're not an expert, because you're always going to be a beginner. Whereas some people say like, you know, you're not a beginner after the first day.
Yeah.
And so like everyone has like a different level with being like, I'm going to be a beginner, you know, until this is the thing I can do in my sleep, you know? So I guess like you still get to be a beginner with playing around with stuff.
Yeah, and like luckily YouTube is such a critical tool. So I was trying to like figure out, again, using that like cool animation for the lower third as an example. I was trying to figure it out, and then I got to like maybe 10-20 minutes in there, and I was just like, my brain's done. I need to, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I just want to go do something else. So let's say that project's still on the back burner for now, but at least like I know how to like get it started, and like I have the software. So it's like I have the tools. It's just a matter of like, yeah, taking that first step, which is always the hardest part.
Totally. It totally is the hardest part, to just like greet yourself and be like, okay, we're gonna dive into this, whatever the timeline is, doesn't matter. Like the fact that you started it is what matters.
So when are we getting episode 3?
Episode 3 came out on Friday.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that one then.
No big deal. Yeah, it came out a couple days ago, and then episode 4 should be out probably early next week.
Okay.
I chatted with a woman who runs her own clothing brand that she started like out of like, and is just crushing it. And so it's been cool to like get to talk to folks that I wouldn't normally have gotten a chance to talk to in my day-to-day life.
You know, in your interviewing, you're absolutely nailing these transitions, by the way, because you got you brought in the beginner, and then now you're referencing this woman, and you know, you started your own handmade goods as you know, COVID was still in the midst, which it still is right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked with your mom. I've seen you post about on social media, where like, let's say it's a hand knitted bikini top, for example. That's the one I've seen. So where did this idea come from to start knitting all this? Like, did you knit that sweater you're wearing right now?
I didn't. I super wish I did. I made a bright yellow one of this that's like over there, and I was gonna wear it, and then it felt like a little too much. Just a little. Yeah, it's like bright sun yellow. But yeah, so like I've been knitting for a while. Like it's pretty fun. I don't know, it's like a pretty relaxing thing for me. And I've crocheted a little bit too. Like, you know, I'm like pretty settled into like my grandma hobbies of like, you know, I crochet and then I go to bed at 8:30. Like, but with the crocheting, I made a tank top for my friend for Christmas, and I posted a picture of it on Instagram, and it just like took off. I got like 30 messages that night that were like, you know, how do I order one? How do I buy one? Like, you know, not even asking, just like, this is my size. Like, these are the colors I want. I'll pay you. Like, just give it to me. Like,
get to the point.
Yeah. And right now, like, I'm in the process of applying for jobs, which is sort of a full-time job in itself. And so in that process of like working on my podcast, applying for jobs, I've started crocheting and I've started selling these, and they've turned into just this, it's like turned into a whole different entity that I was not expecting. And like, it's covering, and I'm so thankful for it. Like it's covering, you know, bills here and there. And like, it's just nice to have like, you know, some like random extra cash for something that I was going to be doing anyways.
Yeah. Like I asked your mom about it because she brought it up because she was in the office, I think maybe Wednesday or Friday, and she's like, "Oh, you should ask Claudia about her, hand knitted goods." And I was just like, "Yeah, I saw them on social media." Like, I was thinking, I feel like a hand knit bikini top would be pretty warm, but she's like, "No, it's like it, airs out. There's little pockets
Oh
up
my
there."
gosh.
So yeah, we talked about that. I was like, "This is kind of weird," because I'm slightly picturing it. I was like, "I'm gonna stop right there." So
We'll just leave it. Yeah.
just,
I mean, they're
we'll
like
leave it. We'll leave it.
shirts. They're
Yeah,
shirts, but yeah, it's funny to like hear that like my mother is,
yeah.
like things, yeah, spread in funny ways, but yeah, I was like, yeah, someone asked to buy one, like, oh, a couple people asked to buy one, and like I got contracted with this shop in Seattle, and a store in Hawaii to like
Wow.
make them and sell them there. And so it's been this like really cool, it's turning into something that like I totally wasn't expecting.
So, as far as you're the one making them, or like would say the shop
Mhm.
in Hawaii is going to help you make them and like start producing them, or because I'm
Mm,
trying to think like you creating like 50, like let's say size, I don't, I'm like, I don't know the breast measurements, but like say like medium,
yeah.
knit bikini tops. I'm just trying to think of you making 50 of those. That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, my hands are definitely like my thumbs are sore, which feels so
Yeah.
silly to be like, oh, my hands are so tired from crocheting. Um, but I mean, like these are they're like small businesses that are asking for, 4 or 5 here and there.
Ah, okay.
Which is like kind of all I can fit in because each one
Yeah.
takes like a pretty long amount of time. But I'm hand making all of them. I've been like starting to figure out like sourcing my yarn from like more sustainable places and not buying them from like bulk, craft stores.
Yeah.
And so like it's been cool to like even head into a transition like that where like I'm at a scale where I can start thinking about using the material, like having better materials. And like I'm getting commissioned for certain stuff in terms of, like I want a sweater like this, like I want something that looks like this. And so like I said, it's been really fun, and it's something hilarious that like is now scheduled, and it's like 6 a.m. to 8:30. I'm like working on the flowers, like which is so goofy, but I feel like everyone's been figuring out really creative ways to both use their time, but like really creative ways to like support themselves during the pandemic.
Well, when you say it like that with that accent, that's what makes it a little more goofy. It's like, oh yeah, dude, my flowers. It's a
Yeah, I know.
the daisies. It's like,
My
oh
little
my.
daisies.
Oh, so where do you want this business to go? Like how far do you want to take this?
Honestly, I'm excited to kind of reach the end of my order list, and like I'm hopefully kind of putzing out by the time I get a job.
Okay.
That like, because when I break it down, I'm making like $3 an hour.
That's not a lot. That's not a lot.
It's not too much, but and so like I'm excited to get to the point where like, because I used to really just like love giving my stuff away. Like I knit this hat with sheep on it. Have a sheep hat. Like that was always so fun, and so I'm really excited to like get back to that spot in
Yeah.
that like it's something that brings me a lot of joy, and I've like had a little bit of stress of like, oh my gosh, I have to finish 4 of these this week. Like, oh my, this is so many, I'm like staying up late trying to fill orders, which again, like I am so thankful for. I don't want to sound ungrateful in
Yeah.
that process because I am thankful that people are supporting me and are buying things from me. But yeah, I don't see this necessarily growing into a whole production line.
Sorry, Mama and Papa Bueermann. This is
I
the end of the
know.
line.
End of the line. I'm
Sorry.
not going to be the CEO of like Clouds Crochet.
So you're such a upbeat, you're such a half glass full person, and then you just want to see the sunshine when it's raining and pouring down rain. And you have a passion for the outdoors. How were you when the wildfires were happening, both in Alameda and I think also in Multnomah? Because I think the Multnomah was maybe like 2-3 years ago, something like that. And
Yeah,
then the
the Eagle
wildfires
Creek
was,
one.
yeah, the Eagle Creek, and then the wildfires were down in California. Those were back this past September. How were you
Yeah.
kind of working with the thought of this nice greenery that Oregon, Washington has getting damaged?
Yeah. I mean, it was especially this year. I know that it's just been a bad couple of years with wildfires, like so related to, and this is like so related and cannot be divorced from the conversation of climate change, and the climate crisis that we're going through right now. But especially this year, I was working at a winery when all of the wildfires were going on back in September, like August and September. And here in Walla Walla, I mean, I was in Portland kind of the day in the first like couple of days that it was like truly looked like the world was on fire. That like we've all seen those photos of like that, piercing gray smoke with like, an orange sun that you can stare directly at. And it was like that here in Walla Walla too. And like I said, I was working at a winery and I spent an entire day, a couple days in a row actually, working outside because it was COVID. So you couldn't sit inside. You could only sit outside, and like serving folks who were happily like sipping away on their wine outside in the smoke when it was, like hazardous air quality. And so,
Okay.
which was wild. Like,
This is what? You can drink
so-
wine inside. You guys know that, right?
yeah, like buy a bottle, take it home, sit inside, you're
There you
done.
go. Yeah.
And so on one hand, like it was so wild to be in this space where I was like surrounded with people that were just like casually drinking wine, sitting outside, like not acknowledging like this like really devastating thing going on around them. Like it was really business as usual. Like, well, we came to Walla Walla to drink wine and we're gonna do that, Not this like there are, our Pacific Northwest and California are on fire right now. And at the same time, like there's this long history of fire suppression that land management agencies that the US government has encouraged. And like this really ignoring of indigenous practices of like helping encourage forest fires because like they're natural. They should happen, It's okay for a whole forest to burn down. Like that's what's needed to like maintain healthy populations and keep things in check and like, and so that's super needed. But we have this like long history of fire suppression, and seeing major events like these just bring, that history and bring the climate crisis into this like perfect storm, if you will, of that like is so palpable that you can't ignore.
It's one of those things where like, I have facial hair, so I need to trim some of it for more to grow in, for example. And then from the wildfires, like it's sad to think that it does like such greenery. That's what Oregon and Washington are known for. Some of it needs to get burned down for more to sprout out. So it's sad, but luckily they're having these protections coming in, so it's like hopefully something will happen. I just remember when the Multnomah fires happened, and then we found out exactly how it happened. We're just like, throw that kid to jail. He's done. But he's like, so it's like, I think it's a pretty hefty fine too for all the damages.
I know, like, and in some ways you like feel bad for this family.
Yeah.
Because they're now like that's gonna be something he's gonna carry like his entire life. But at the same time, like that's what happens when I mean that like there needs to be an education and like normal conversation, and like I don't know where that education needs to happen, but
it needs to happen.
It needs to happen. And it like it's one of those things where like bringing explosives into a dry forest in the middle of the summer, when there hasn't been rain for a couple of months, like wires are not being connected in terms of like really crucial things.
Yeah. And it's like, do you not want to just light them off in your driveway or something? Is that like a negative? What's wrong with your driveway? Now your driveway is upset.
Feeling alone.
Feeling alone. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So, with this outdoor passion, is that how the nickname Clouds came about for you?
Not really. my freshman year of school, we were like sitting around with our dorm. Like I was, like little nervous
Sure.
freshman Claudia, had my backpack on, was like so ready for classes. And we were like just joking around about nicknames. And a couple of my friends in high school had like called me Clouds as like, everyone, I feel like you get nicknames like randomly from random stuff. And it was just an abbreviation of Claudia.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that one of my nicknames was Clouds, and it like kind of stuck with a couple people, and then it like stuck with more people. And then all of a sudden, like part of the dorm knew me as Clouds, part of the dorm knew me as Claudia. And then classes were starting and I like had to pick one because I was sort of two different people. Because you're like, oh, I'm Claudia, and people were like, oh, I thought you were Clouds. It's like, oh, that must be someone else, And so I was like these two completely different people, and I had to pick one, and I like not totally thinking, I was like, oh, I'll go with Clouds, and then that has stuck for the last 4 years. And as I apply for stuff and like in a professional capacity, I go by Claudia.
Yeah.
But like all of my friends and like, the people around me call me Clouds, and that has stuck.
You ever think
So-
about developing two different like personas for like Claudia and Clouds? It's just be like, oh, that's a Clouds thing, give her another shot. Blah, blah, blah. Claudia, you know what? She has to work on her resume. So
We're cutting you off. Yeah.
Cutting you off.
Yeah, like Clouds is the one that like sits and crochets and like, spends time outside, and yeah, Claudia is the one that's like all buttoned up,
And
So.
I mean, this also can apply because, again, you went back to glass half full, which a lot of people say when your glass is half full, your heads are in the clouds. So
Yeah, I'm set. I set myself
Nailed
up
it.
for success. So.
You really did, and I'm happy I could help
Thanks.
you continue on with this success of living with the clouds.
Truly, and thanks for that like self-actualization going on. And
What is your secret like? I don't know, preferred way to relax that no one really knows much about? Because like for me, it's I've been very much into like TV, movies, and then recently I started doing reading. So like I'm starting to incorporate that more and more. But I'm just like I feel weird kind of announcing it out to the world. I feel like it has to be like my well kept secret. This is kind of like I'm breaking this for you, but what
Thanks.
is your like secret way you love to relax?
yeah, should I whisper it since it's a secret?
I gotta whisper.
This is gonna sound so odd, but I think one of my I have two.
Okay.
Like I live in a really small space. I live in like a little tiny house cottage situation, and it takes like 27 minutes ish to clean. Like I can have like a destroyed house, like shoes everywhere, clothes everywhere, like sink full of dishes, like books out, like yarn, like hanging off the door, and I can go from like that to like a completely clean space in a really short amount of time. And I think like when I'm looking to relax, I'm like looking to also kind of calm myself down and like, have time to myself. And so like being able to like, this is my other one. I've recently started listening. It's so silly to say out loud. I've started listening to Harry Potter on audiobooks.
Really?
And it's amazing. I don't say anything because I haven't read past the 4th book. Like, I don't know what happens. I was like never that into Harry Potter. But I can like put Harry Potter on and clean my house, and I like feel like a new person. Because I'm like someone who's a big proponent of like clean space, like kind of like organized head,
Sure. Yeah.
And that's like, it's so lame to admit that like I put on Harry Potter and I clean my house to relax. but it really is. It's like something that has given me like a lot of comfort in being like I'm super in control of my like small space around me, and like when I do that, I am super relaxed by the end of it.
Yeah, it's also very exact. 27 minutes. That's like
I've only timed it about 1 billion times.
Jeez. I know, but like I agree with you when it comes to like a clean workspace is like an organized mind, because that's how I am at work. Even here at home, like I'm in the process of moving. It's like when I have my own separate studio and now my own bedroom, it's like those are two gonna be like my two kind of personas, going back to the clouds and gonna be like me. So I even my girlfriend's like, you know what, you're way more organized than I am. And I was like, I take that as a point of pride. It's like, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I just feel like it feels good to be organized. And the woman that I was most recently interviewing for my podcast, she was like, I'm a total type B personality. Like, I love chaos. And I was like, oh God, that really stresses me out to think
You
about.
got the winching eye.
Yeah, like, and so I'm sure that like having a space for you to like have your studio and have like your room, like things, and have life a little separate, like that'll help so much in terms of like keeping track of like what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus, with my job, kind of helping your dad out or helping other people in the company as the office admin, I need to be organized. I need to be able to like know exactly what's going on and how to like properly give them the right information. So I don't look bad. I don't want to look bad.
No one wants that.
No one wants that. So, Claudia, as we wrap this up, I do like to ask 2 questions from this packet of 170 hypothetical questions.
Yes.
So I'm only gonna give you 2. So if you want the whole 170, we definitely can. You're very, friendly, outgoing, very talkative. So another episode can be very much in the books. So my first question to you is, since you do like to, talk, have conversations, how would the world change if there was no internal monologue and everything you thought spoke out loud?
Everything that you thought spoke out loud?
Everyone. Like if like my thoughts like, oh, I'm gonna go get a sandwich after this, like instead of like keeping it to myself, I just say it out loud. How would the world change for you if that was the new norm?
Oh my gosh. As someone who's like a big already, like I'm someone who's like constantly putzing around like talking to themselves, because I kind of need I need to hear what's going on in my brain.
Yeah.
I don't know how many things personally would change. The positive part of me wants to be like, the world would be a better place because everyone would like, know what folks were thinking. Like they would know, there are like fewer secrets. Like I like to think that would be this really positive thing, but I think it would turn to chaos so quickly. Like from the time you're like a little tot, they're like, think before you speak. Like,
That's true.
think about what you're gonna say, because like you've talked to, like when you talk to little kids and they're like, yesterday I like I did this thing, and you're like, okay, well, like that's nice, but like if you had thought about what you were gonna say, it would have come out so differently. And so I just see the world like dissolving into chaos.
I know, because I asked a question to one of my guests, I think like maybe a handful of episodes ago, like, oh, how would you want to live in a world where you can see everyone's like insides, you can see the organs and all that? And he was like, honestly, no, because I don't want to see like my homie getting very intimate with his lady or stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I feel like if that was the new norm where everyone has to be like outgoing with their thoughts, very perverted world.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
It very much is. It's terrifying.
Very much. Yeah. What is that? How you feel? Like?
Oh, I think also I would be out of a podcast if I, people had that, because then, I can't dig things out of people's thoughts. It's just gonna spout right out there. It's like,
right.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Thanks. God.
Yeah.
My second question to you is that since you are I immediately like pick these 2 out without even like having a conversation with you, because like from my feel of like how you are, if you were tasked to redesign your country's flag, how would you change it?
Whoa, that's awesome. Oh man, that's such a good question. I think, okay, I know exactly what I would do.
Oh, there she is.
I recently, oh my God, this is really adding to my like grandmother clouds crocheting, going to bed early. I recently finished this huge puzzle. That was it was like a massive culmination of all of the state's state wildflowers.
Ooh.
And it was beautiful. It was like the most like visually pleasing but like most fun puzzle and it was like so informative because it was like everyone's state flower. And I don't know, I love flowers a lot. Like I love having flowers. I love seeing flowers. I've talked about flowers like 12 times already on this show. and I think like getting to see that, like that is something that like both is representative like of the ecology of that place, but like also like what those people stand for. Like flowers represent so much that if I could redesign the US's flag, it would like be the picture on the cover of that box. It would like be all of the state's wildflowers.
Nice. That's a good one too.
Thank you.
Plus you're outdoorsy. I mean, you have a stronger allergen. So, I mean, being out with the flowers just does make a whole lot of sense for you.
Yeah, it like kind of checks my boxes for me.
Exactly. So
what would your flag look like?
Oh, I don't know if you could tell, I'm pretty nerdy with the superheroes, and there's more extra behind that you cannot see, but I would just put a giant Batman logo.
Amazing. Amazing.
Either that or just like we talked about, like, you know, having unification, unity, just trying to like get everyone to work together, trying to find some sort of symbol to embed that's not like comic book related already. So I think that's what I would have it be as. So
awesome.
Oh God, Claudia, this was an absolute fantastic conversation. But before I let you go, what platforms is the Beginners Project on?
It's available on Spotify and Anchor, and a couple services off of that I cannot list them. It's not on Apple Podcasts yet, but primarily on Spotify. Yeah,
I use Anchor too, so
awesome.
It's very useful. It's very nice to like just put one there and know it's gonna get dispersed to like not just Spotify but to like the smaller platforms.
Super helpful.
So
super helpful.
And then is Instagram the best way to get a hold of you, or as far as like Facebook? I know you have a Facebook, but I don't think you check it that much.
Not really.
My friend request is still pending, so
I think so. Might be. Checked it about 6 months ago. So, but Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me. At Clouds Rose or at the Beginners Project.
Perfect. All right.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This was so fun to get to chat with you and be a guest on your show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. If you would like, do the whole podcast guest switch. So like I'll be
awesome.
Yours. There you go. There it is.
Perfect.
It is. So fans of the show, keep an eye out. Follow the Beginners Project on Instagram, and then go subscribe, I guess is what people use when it comes to the audio platforms. But check it out. It's a great episode, and plus you dive a lot into not just your podcast, but in your website too. Beginners Project, I believe .com. .org. You really do your research, which is like insane. I was like, you like the god of beginning. I don't remember the name specifically, but I remember seeing that mentioned. I was just like, there's a god for that? What?
I know. I had no idea. Janus, we named January after. He's like a pivotal dude for us.
Oh.
So anyways,
that guy.
Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of the episode. If you like what you heard or watched and would like more episodes from Keoni Chats, the show can be found on all major podcast platforms under Keoni Chats. A video version is available on YouTube under Keoni Chats as well. So like and subscribe on those platforms to keep in the loop as far as the next episode released. But if you would like to be a guest, go ahead and email me your story at kcmedia13@yahoo.com, and I'd love to get you scheduled. To keep up to date with all of the episode release announcements on social media, the KC Media brand can be found on Instagram and Twitter under KC Media 13. And then on Facebook, it can be found under Conluke Media. So until the next episode, everyone, please take care.